Charlotte Rains was kneeling in her small kitchen when her phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on October 22nd. At 63, with silver hair pulled back and weathered hands clasped in prayer, she'd been asking God for guidance about her neighbor Dalton Pritchard's dying bull, a situation that had consumed the entire community of Hot Springs, Arkansas, for 3 days. The call was from Dalton himself, and his voice was breaking. "Charlie, I'm out of options. Dr. Crowley just left. She says there's nothing more she can do. She's recommending I put Shelby down tomorrow morning." Dalton's breath hitched. "That bull represents everything I've built. Without him, I lose my breeding program. I lose the farm." Charlotte stood slowly, her arthritic knees protesting. For 20 years, she'd known Dalton as a good man, hard worker, and church-going neighbor who'd helped her countless times since her separation 7 years ago. She'd been praying about Shelby for 3 days, but now something stirred in her spirit. Not quite a voice, but a strong impression she'd learned not to ignore. "Dalton, what if there's someone who could help that we haven't asked yet?" "Who?" "Vera Crowley is the best large animal vet in Garland County. If she can't figure it out..." "What about Ezra?" Silence. Then, "Your son? The one who works up near Fayetteville?" "Charlie, he's 200 miles away. I can't ask him to drive through the night for a bull that's probably going to die anyway." "You're not asking. I am." Charlotte dialed her son immediately. Ezra Rains was in the break room at Ozark Advanced Veterinary Services, drinking his 4th coffee of a 14-hour shift when his mother's call came through. At 34, he'd built a reputation as one of Arkansas's most skilled large animal veterinarians, the specialist other vets called when they'd exhausted their options. But that reputation came at a cost: perpetual exhaustion, running on caffeine and adrenaline. "Mom, it's almost midnight. Is everything okay?" "Ezra, I need you to drive to Hot Springs. Tonight. Right now." Ezra's mind immediately went to health crisis. "Are you hurt? Is Iris..." "We're fine. But Dalton Pritchard's bull is dying and Vera Crowley has given up. Ezra, this animal represents that man's entire livelihood. If Shelby dies, Dalton loses everything, and I believe you're supposed to help." Ezra closed his eyes, feeling the exhaustion in his bones. He had surgery scheduled for 6 a.m. If Dr. Crowley, a vet with 30 years of experience, couldn't diagnose it, what made his mother think he could? "Mom, I've been working for 14 hours straight, and if Dr. Crowley couldn't figure it out, then maybe you'll see something she didn't. Ezra, I know you're tired. I know it's a long drive. I know the odds are terrible, but I feel in my spirit that you're supposed to make this drive." Ezra thought about his father. Dead 6 years now from a heart attack, shortly after separating from Charlotte following 35 years of difficult marriage marked by drinking problems and eventual necessary distance. His father used to say, "We don't save every animal, but we owe every animal our best effort." "Okay," Ezra said finally. "I'm leaving now. I'll be there by 2:30 a.m. "Thank you, son. I'll be praying every minute." The moment Charlotte hung up, word spread through Hot Springs like wildfire. Small communities operate on information networks faster than any internet. Prayer chains, neighbor calls, church groups. Within 20 minutes, half the congregation knew Ezra was driving 200 miles in the middle of the night to treat a dying bull after working a double shift. The reactions were swift and unforgiving. Ruth Henderson called Charlotte. "Honey, is Ezra okay? I mean mentally? Because this doesn't sound rational." Frank Morrison stopped by. "Charlie, I respect your faith, but your boy's going to kill himself driving exhausted to treat an animal that's already dead. If Vera can't fix it, it can't be fixed." Pastor Malcolm Stone called with gentle concern. "Charlie, I admire Ezra's dedication, but wisdom requires knowing when to accept limitations. This sounds less like faith and more like denial." And then Iris Rains, Ezra's 37-year-old sister, an ER nurse in Little Rock, called her mother with barely contained anger. "Mom, what were you thinking? Ezra's exhausted. You're sending him on a 200-mile midnight drive to treat an animal a competent vet already declared hopeless. This is dangerous." "Your brother is a skilled professional making his own decision," Charlotte said carefully. "His decision influenced by you playing the faith card." Iris's voice was sharp. "If Ezra falls asleep at the wheel, if he crashes, That's on you." The words stung, but Charlotte held firm. "I believe your brother is supposed to make this drive." "That's not good enough, Mom. Believing isn't a substitute for common sense." By 1 a.m., Charlotte had received 17 calls and texts, all variations of the same message. "This is crazy. Ezra's wasting his time. That bull is already dead." Vernon Bailey, Dalton's neighbor and longtime friend, was the most direct. He appeared at Charlotte's door at 1:15 a.m. "Charlie, I respect you, but you're making a mistake. Vera Crowley is the best vet in the county. If she says that bull is dying, that bull is dying. All Ezra's going to accomplish is confirming what we already know while endangering himself." "What if Vera missed something?" Charlotte asked quietly. "Vera doesn't miss things. She's been doing this 30 years. 30 years of experience can also mean 30 years of assumptions. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes." Vernon shook his head. "You're setting Ezra up for public failure. The whole community's watching." That was what hurt most. Not the criticism of Charlotte, but the realization that if Ezra couldn't save Shelby, he wouldn't just fail privately. He'd fail in front of everyone who'd already decided this mission was foolish. They were calling her son crazy before he'd even arrived. While Charlotte prayed in her kitchen, specific prayers for Ezra's safety, alertness, wisdom, and clarity, Ezra drove south on Highway 71 through the dark Arkansas night. His phone rang through his truck's speakers. "Iris. Little brother, are you out of your mind?" "Probably," Ezra admitted, keeping his eyes on the white lines disappearing under his headlights. "You're driving 200 miles after a 14-hour shift to treat an animal already declared hopeless. This is not rational. Since when is anything Mom asks us to do rational? She operates on faith, not logic. And you're enabling it." Iris's voice was frustrated but loving. "Ezra, what happens when you get there and confirm what Dr. Crowley already knows, that this bull is dying and there's nothing to be done?" "Then I tried, and sometimes that's enough. Dad would tell you you're an idiot for driving exhausted. Dad would also be in the truck with me." Ezra felt the familiar ache of loss. "I miss him, Iris." "Me too. Drive safe." At 2:28 a.m., Ezra's truck pulled into Dalton Pritchard's farm. The 52-year-old farmer looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Eyes red from exhaustion and crying, shoulders slumped with the weight of impending loss. "Dr. Rains, thank you for coming. I know everyone thinks this is pointless. Show me the bull." Inside the barn, under harsh fluorescent lights, Shelby lay on his side in a large stall. The 2,400-pound Angus bull was a shadow of his former champion self, black coat dull, ribs showing through wasted muscle, breathing labored, eyes barely focusing. Ezra knelt beside him and began his examination. Back in Hot Springs, Charlotte sat in her kitchen surrounded by Pastor Stone and 3 women from her prayer group who'd come despite their skepticism. They held hands in a circle, praying for Ezra's wisdom and Shelby's healing. At 2:45 a.m., Vernon Bailey sent a text to the community group chat. "Rains boy just arrived at Dalton's, taking bets on how long before he confirms what Vera already told us. That bull's a goner. Waste of a 200-mile drive." The community waited, most of them convinced that morning would prove them right. The bull would be dead, Ezra would have wasted his time, and Charlie Rains would learn that faith doesn't trump reality. None of them knew what Ezra was about to discover, what he'd find that Dr. Crowley, with all her experience and competence, had missed, what would shock everyone. Ezra spent the first 20 minutes examining Shelby in complete silence, while Dalton watched anxiously from the stall door. He checked vitals, palpated the abdomen, examined mucous membranes, listened to heart and lung sounds, assessed hydration levels. Everything Dr. Crowley had documented was accurate. Fever with no pattern, severe dehydration despite IV fluids, rapid weight loss, general systemic collapse. The symptoms didn't match any standard diagnosis. Dr. Crowley's notes say all blood work came back inconclusive, Ezra asked, reviewing the medical file. Everything. She tested for infections, parasites, poisoning, metabolic disorders. Nothing explained it. Dalton's voice was defeated. She said in 30 years she'd never seen anything like this. Ezra stood slowly, thinking. His father used to say that when standard diagnostics fail, you go back to basics. Observation, environment, recent changes. Walk me through the last 2 weeks. Anything different in Shelby's routine, diet, environment? Dalton thought carefully. Nothing major. Same feed supplier, same pasture, same water source. Only thing different was... He paused. About 10 days ago, we had that cold snap. Temperatures dropped to freezing overnight. I moved Shelby from the south pasture to this barn temporarily, gave him the stall with the heat lamp to keep him comfortable. Heat lamp? Ezra's attention sharpened. Show me. Dalton pointed to a large industrial heat lamp mounted in the corner of Shelby's stall, positioned about 4 feet above where the bull had been lying for 3 days. Ezra walked over, examining the lamp carefully. It was an older model, the kind used in agricultural settings for decades. He touched the metal housing, still warm. How long has this lamp been running? Continuously since the cold snap, 10 days straight. Ezra's mind was racing. He knelt beside Shelby again, this time examining the bull's skin more carefully. Along Shelby's back and shoulders, the areas directly under the heat lamp, the skin showed subtle changes, slight discoloration, texture differences. Mr. Pritchard, do you have a thermometer? I need to check something. Dalton brought an infrared thermometer from the barn office. Ezra measured the temperature directly under the heat lamp, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Then he measured the ambient barn temperature, 58 degrees. That's a 46-degree differential, Ezra said quietly. Continuous exposure for 10 days. I don't understand. Heat lamps are standard. We use them all the time. Standard for short-term use, but continuous exposure at this intensity? Ezra was checking Shelby's symptoms against a mental database. Dr. Crowley was looking for infectious disease, poisoning, metabolic disorders. She wasn't looking for chronic heat stress because who would suspect heat stress from a warming lamp in October? Dalton stared. Heat stress? In 50-degree weather? Not environmental heat stress. Localized chronic hyperthermia from constant radiant heat exposure. Ezra's voice was gaining certainty. Think about it. Shelby's been lying in this stall for 10 days, unable to move away from a heat source generating 104-degree temperatures 4 feet above him. His body's been fighting constant overheating. That explains the fever spikes. Not infection, but thermal regulation failure. The dehydration, excessive fluid loss trying to cool down. The weight loss, metabolic exhaustion from fighting hyperthermia for days. But heat stress would show up on blood work, wouldn't it? Not necessarily. Chronic low-grade hyperthermia doesn't always show classic heat stroke markers. It manifests as general systemic stress that looks like a dozen other conditions. Ezra was already moving. We need to get him out of this stall immediately. Move him somewhere cool. Stop the heat exposure. Start aggressive cooling protocols. At 3:15 a.m., Charlotte's phone rang. Ezra. Mom, I found it. Dr. Crowley didn't miss an exotic disease. She missed something simple, chronic heat stress from a warming lamp running too long at too high intensity. Charlotte felt tears spring to her eyes. You can save him? If we act fast. We're moving him now. I'm starting treatment. Mom. Ezra's voice was thick with emotion. You were right. God knew I needed to be here. Vera's not incompetent. She's excellent. But she was looking for complex problems. Sometimes the answer is simple, just hidden in plain sight. I'm still praying, son. Don't stop working. By 4 a.m., Shelby had been moved to a cool stall with fans, and Ezra had started IV fluids with electrolyte rebalancing, cooling therapy, and supportive care for organ stress. By 5:30 a.m., Shelby's temperature had stabilized. By 6 a.m., he was alert enough to drink water on his own. At 7 a.m., Dalton called Dr. Crowley. Vera, you need to come see this. When Vera arrived at 7:30, she found Shelby standing, weak but standing, drinking from a water bucket while Ezra monitored his vitals. I don't understand, Vera said, staring. Last night he was dying. He was dying. From chronic heat stress we didn't catch because we weren't looking for it. Ezra walked her through his findings. The heat lamp placement, the temperature differential, the localized hyperthermia symptoms. Vera was silent, processing. Then, I completely missed it. I was so focused on infectious causes and toxins that I never considered environmental heat exposure in October. Dr. Rains, this is brilliant diagnostic work. It was fresh eyes and desperation, Ezra said honestly, and my mother's faith that something could be done. By 8 a.m., on word had spread through Hot Springs, the dying bull was recovering. Ezra Rains had found what Vera Crowley missed. The same people who'd called him crazy 12 hours earlier were now calling him a hero. Vernon Bailey showed up at Dalton's farm at 8:30, watching Shelby eat hay. I'll be damned. I was sure you'd wasted your time. A lot of people were, Ezra said, exhausted but satisfied. What made you think to check for heat stress? I didn't have 30 years of assumptions. I just had fresh eyes and a mother who wouldn't let me quit before I tried. At Charlotte's kitchen table, Pastor Stone sat with her, both watching Ezra's update text. Shelby's going to make it. Full recovery expected. Charlie, Pastor Stone said quietly, I owe you an apology. I called this denial. It was faith. Sometimes, Charlotte said, smiling through tears, they look the same until the outcome reveals which it was. By noon on October 23rd, Hot Springs was in shock. The community coffee shop, Maggie's Diner on Central Avenue, was packed with farmers, church members, and locals who'd spent the night convinced Ezra Rains was wasting his time. Now they crowded around tables, reading updates on their phones, trying to process what had happened. I still don't understand it, Frank Morrison said, stirring his coffee. Vera Crowley's been treating livestock for 30 years. How did a heat lamp, something we all use, nearly kill that bull without her noticing? Because we all use them, Ruth Henderson said, reading an article Vera had posted on the county agriculture board. That's exactly why nobody suspected it. Heat lamps are so common, so standard, that checking for heat stress in October never crossed anyone's mind. Vera's post was circulating rapidly. Professional reflection. Last night I recommended euthanasia for a bull I believed was dying from unknown causes. Dr. Ezra Rains drove 200 miles and diagnosed chronic localized hyperthermia from heat lamp overexposure. Something I completely missed because I was looking for exotic problems instead of simple environmental factors. This is a humbling reminder that fresh perspective matters, that assumptions blind us, and that sometimes the youngest voice in the room sees what experience misses. Thank you, Dr. Rains, for saving an animal I'd given up on. The post had 300 shares in 3 hours. Vernon Bailey sat at the counter, shaking his head. I sent a text last night taking bets on how long before Ezra confirmed the bull was dead. I feel like an idiot. We all do, Pastor Stone said, sliding into the booth. We spent last night calling that boy crazy. Turns out the crazy one was the only sane person in the room. At Dalton Pritchard's farm, Shelby was eating hay with increasing appetite, his strength returning hour by hour. Ezra sat on a hay bale, monitoring vitals every 30 minutes, running on pure adrenaline since he'd been awake for 26 hours straight. Dalton brought him coffee. Dr. Rains, I don't know how to thank you. That bull represents 15 years of breeding work. My whole operation, you saved my livelihood. I just looked where Dr. Crowley didn't think to look. She's an excellent vet. This wasn't incompetence, it was assumptions. The whole community called you crazy last night. I know. My sister told me. Ezra smiled tiredly. They weren't entirely wrong. Driving 200 miles exhausted to treat a dying bull after a competent vet gave up. That's not rational behavior. Then what would you call it? Ezra thought about his mother, praying in her kitchen, about his father's old saying, about the impression that had made him say yes despite every logical reason to refuse. Faith, maybe, or stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Charlotte's phone didn't stop ringing all morning. Neighbors who'd criticized her decision were calling to apologize. Church members who'd questioned her judgment were asking for forgiveness. Charlie, I'm so sorry, Ruth said when she called at 10 a.m. I said terrible things about Ezra last night. You were concerned for his safety. That's not terrible. I called him irrational. I questioned his mental state. And now? Charlotte asked gently. Now I'm wondering how I could have been so wrong. How we all could have been so wrong. That was the conversation Charlotte had 17 times that morning. People weren't just apologizing. They were genuinely shaken by how quickly they'd dismissed something that turned out to be right. Iris called at 11:30. Mom, I owe you an apology. A big one. You were protecting your brother. I understand. I wasn't just protecting him. I was dismissing your faith. I called it denial and recklessness. Iris's voice was thick with emotion. But you were right. You had that impression, that feeling, whatever you want to call it. And you trusted it even when everyone said you were wrong. That takes courage I didn't give you credit for. Thank you, sweetheart. How did you know? How were you so sure? Charlotte was quiet for a moment. I wasn't sure about the outcome. I was sure about the trying. There's a difference. At 2 p.m., the local news arrived. Kark Channel 4 out of Little Rock, doing a story on the 200-mile miracle. Veterinarian saves bull others had given up on. The reporter interviewed Dalton. When Dr. Crowley said there was nothing more she could do, what went through your mind? Devastation. That bull represents everything I've built. Losing him meant losing the farm. And when Charlotte Rains suggested calling her son? Honestly, I thought it was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary. But when you're out of options, you take the long shot. They interviewed Vera Crowley, who handled the questions with professional grace. Dr. Rains demonstrated excellent diagnostic thinking. He approached the case without my assumptions, which allowed him to see what I'd overlooked. This is why second opinions matter. This is why fresh perspective is valuable. I'm grateful he made that drive, and I'm grateful Shelby will recover. And they interviewed Ezra, who was barely coherent from exhaustion. My mother called. She believed I could help. Sometimes that's enough reason to try, even when the odds are terrible. People called you crazy last night. What do you say to them now? Ezra smiled. I say sometimes the crazy ones are the only sane people in the room, and sometimes trying matters more than succeeding. By evening, Shelby was strong enough to stand for extended periods. His temperature was normal. His appetite was returning. Ezra's prognosis, full recovery within 2 weeks. Charlotte drove to Dalton's farm at 6 p.m., bringing dinner for Ezra, who hadn't eaten since the previous day. She found him in the barn, sitting beside Shelby's stall, watching the bull with quiet satisfaction. You did good, son. We did good, Mom. You had the faith. I had the skills. Together it worked. The whole community's talking. They're shocked. Shocked that I was right? Or shocked that they were wrong? Both, Charlotte admitted. People don't like realizing how quickly they dismissed something important. It's humbling. Ezra looked at Shelby. I keep thinking about Dad, about what he used to say. We owe every animal our best effort? Yeah, I almost didn't come. I was exhausted. The odds were terrible. Everyone was saying it was pointless. But then I thought, what if I'm the only person willing to try? What if my pointless effort is actually the only chance this animal has? Ezra's voice was quiet. Turns out it was. Charlotte sat beside her son. Your father would be proud. You think? I know. They sat in companionable silence, watching a bull who'd been dying 12 hours earlier now eating hay peacefully, saved because one exhausted veterinarian had been crazy enough, faithful enough, to drive 200 miles when everyone said it was hopeless. Sometimes crazy and faithful are the same thing. And sometimes the whole community needs to be shocked into remembering that. 1 week after Shelby's recovery, the impact of that October night was still reverberating through Hot Springs. Ezra received calls from veterinary schools wanting to use the case as teaching material. How assumptions blind experienced practitioners. Agricultural journals requested interviews. The Arkansas Veterinary Medical Association invited him to speak at their conference. Locally, changes were more profound. Dalton Pritchard organized a meeting of Garland County farmers. 23 ranchers gathered in his barn, where Shelby had nearly died. We almost lost a $95,000 bull because nobody questioned a heat lamp, Dalton said. How many of us have similar blind spots? The group spent 2 hours reviewing operations, equipment placements, automatic systems, environmental factors made invisible through familiarity. Vernon Bailey, who'd mocked Ezra's drive, spoke quietly. We dismissed that boy because we couldn't imagine Vera missing something. Our confidence and experience blinded us to possibility. Ruth Henderson organized the Second Opinion Fund, community money to help farmers afford veterinary consultations when standard treatment fails. Within a week, $8,000 raised. What Ezra did costs money most farmers don't have, Ruth explained. This fund means they can afford fresh perspective without going bankrupt. Charlotte received a letter from the Arkansas Department of Agriculture thanking her for advocacy that saved valuable livestock. More meaningful was her conversation with Iris. "Mom, I dismissed your faith as irrationality," Iris said over coffee. "But you were right. I'm trying to understand how." "It's paying attention to impressions we usually ignore," Charlotte said. "Something in me said this mattered. I've learned to trust those moments, even when everyone says you're wrong." Especially then. On November 2nd, Ezra returned for follow-up. Shelby had gained 180 pounds, coat glossy, fully recovered. "No lasting damage," Ezra confirmed. "He's going to be fine." Vernon Bailey approached. "Dr. Rains, I mocked you. Took bets on your failure. That was wrong." "The odds were terrible," Ezra said. "You weren't wrong to be skeptical." "Then why'd you come?" "Because I'd rather fail trying than succeed at giving up." Vernon nodded. That night changed how this community thinks. About assumptions, about what's possible when someone's crazy enough to try. "Thank you for being that crazy." Charlotte watched Ezra's truck disappear toward the highway. The news called it shocking. The community called it miraculous. But Charlotte knew what it really was. A son honoring his mother's faith, a community learning humility, and a reminder that sometimes the craziest thing you can do is believe in possibility when everyone else has accepted defeat. Shelby was alive because someone had been crazy enough to try, and an entire community had been shocked into remembering that trying matters, even when everyone says it's hopeless. Especially then. 6 months after that October night, Hot Springs had fundamentally changed. Shelby stood in Dalton's pasture on a warm April morning, 2,600 pounds of healthy Angus muscle, his breeding season producing offspring that would carry his genetics forward for generations. The bull who'd nearly died from a heat lamp now represented not just Dalton's livelihood, but a story the community told itself about humility, faith, and second chances. Ezra drove down from Fayetteville monthly now, not for emergencies, but for routine consultations. Farmers who'd once called him crazy now specifically requested him for difficult cases. His reputation had transformed from that exhausted kid who drove 200 miles to the vet who sees what others miss. "You've become the go-to for hopeless cases," Dalton told him during an April visit. "Every farmer in Garland County knows, when standard treatment fails, call Ezra Rains." "That's a lot of pressure," Ezra admitted. "It's also a lot of trust. We learned something that night. Experience matters, but fresh perspective matters more sometimes." The Second Opinion Fund had grown to $23,000, helping 12 farmers afford specialist consultations that save livestock others had given up on. Ruth Henderson ran it like a mission. "Ezra's drive taught us that giving up shouldn't be the default," she explained at a fund meeting. "Sometimes the answer exists. We just need someone willing to look harder." Vernon Bailey had become the fund's biggest advocate, speaking at churches and community gatherings. "I spent that night mocking a man who was doing what I was too cynical to do, trying. That shame changed me. Now I want to make sure other people get the chance to try before giving up." Charlotte's kitchen remained the prayer center it had always been, but now her faith had credibility even with skeptics. When she said she felt impressed about something, people listened instead of dismissing. Iris visited every other weekend now, her relationship with her mother transformed. "I used to think faith and reason were opposites," she told Charlotte over coffee. "That night taught me they're partners. Your faith gave Ezra permission to try. His reason found the solution. Neither works alone. Your father used to say that," Charlotte remembered, "that faith without action is empty, but action without faith is blind." "I miss him," Iris said. "Me too. But I think he'd be proud. Of Ezra. Of all of us." On the 6-month anniversary, the local paper ran a feature. "The Night Hot Springs Learned Humility." It profiled Ezra, Vera, Dalton, and Charlotte, telling the story of how a community's certainty almost cost a bull's life, and how one exhausted veterinarian's willingness to try anyway saved more than just an animal. Vera Crowley was quoted, "Dr. Rains didn't make me look incompetent. He made us all look human. We have blind spots. We make assumptions. The measure isn't whether we're perfect, but whether we're humble enough to accept that we might be wrong." Ezra was interviewed. "My mother called me crazy. The community called me crazy. Maybe I was crazy, but I'd rather be crazy and try than sane and quit. And Charlotte's words closed the article. Faith doesn't mean knowing the outcome. It means trusting the trying. That night my son tried, and God honored that. Not with magic, with medicine, with persistence, with fresh eyes. Sometimes that's what miracles look like. That April evening, Charlotte stood at her kitchen window watching the Arkansas hills turn gold in the sunset. Her phone buzzed, Ezra sending a photo of Shelby with his first calf of the season. Mom, look what your faith produced. Not just a recovered bull, a whole new generation. Charlotte smiled, typing back, Your trying produced that. I just believed you could. Believing mattered. Thank you for that. Charlotte set down her phone, remembering that October night. The desperate call, the community mockery, the long hours of prayer, the shocking recovery. They'd called her son crazy. Now everyone was shocked by what crazy faith and stubborn trying had accomplished. A bull lived, a farm survived, a community learned humility, and a mother's faith had been vindicated. Not because she'd been certain of success, but because she'd been faithful enough to try when everyone else had given up. Sometimes that's all faith requires. The courage to try when trying seems hopeless. And sometimes, that's exactly when trying matters most. My son drove 200 miles to rescue a dying bull. They called him crazy. Now everyone's in shock.